Hi, welcome to a new episode of Karim Talks About Economics. It's number 16 actually. So, well done, Karim, if you're watching this in the future, and for everyone else, thank you for participating and thank you for watching, first of all. So, this is a podcast where I, Karim, talk about economics and give you an insight into how economists think. I have recently graduated with a Master of Science from Aarhus University in economics. Um, yes. So, the things that characterize this podcast is, of course, that we talk about economics and we talk about the world, but in rough terms, it is spontaneous, it's informative, and it's open minded. It's spontaneous in the sense that it's more of a discussion than a presentation. Um, I have not, I have presented, I have planned a little bit of this podcast. However, the vast majority of this podcast is not planned. Therefore, we might diverge into some directions that I had not planned for, right? Some directions that I've never thought of before. So, as we go along, we might find some interesting avenues together that we want to go through, and we will be doing that. And therefore, it is spontaneous. It's informative in the sense that by this spontaneity, I will be asking questions and you will be hearing my thoughts out loud. And firstly, I will get more informed as I challenge myself throughout this podcast. You will be listening to me and therefore, hopefully, also getting more informed. You will be listening to some opinions that you at least have not heard before, or at least kind of thinking that you've not heard before or seen before if you're watching this on YouTube. It's also informative in the sense that sometimes we read out from a book. In this period of time, we read Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nation. I have planned some other books for us in the future. Sometimes we have some people with us, some interviewee, and those people will also get more informed by participating in this podcast, as they will be asked some questions from me that will trick them a little bit. It might well, it's not that the questions are tricky, it's just that they might not have heard this question before, and therefore they have to think a little bit. Um, and so, just like I get more informed as I do these, the people that I invite to this podcast also get more informed, and by that, I share my experience of this podcast with you guys, and these interviews and this reading, right? And thirdly, it's open minded in the sense that I'm not constrained by anything in particular, not any political views or any political party uh, or anything that is telling me not to do this. I live in Denmark, so it's a very free country where I'm allowed to say nearly whatever I want. And nearly comes in the sense that I'm not allowed to talk badly about an individual without that individual being present. Um, I cannot degrade that individual's honor. That's the part of it. That's in the law, right? And that makes perfect sense. So if and that also um, makes it a little bit informative, right? I can not just say my opinions; they have to be based on actual real things, right? Well, I also want to note that as this is a live podcast, you can ask questions um, in my YouTube channel, and I will be answering those as I check the feed um, constantly. well, not all the time, but when I see it fits and I look at it, I'll be taking up that question. At least at the very end, I will be answering all the questions. Yes. Usually in these podcasts, I start with the news, and this is especially interesting in the pandemic time that we're living, COVID-19, because maybe you're watching this 10 years in the future and COVID-19 is over, or it has mutated into something that's even worse. I don't know. But we go through the news, then we have a follow up from last time. Usually, that is a question that I have asked or proposed, and the idea is then that I go through that question with you guys. Then we have a reading session, and sometimes that is exchanged with an interview. Then we have some new thoughts, that is basically the summary of the interview or the bullet points that I've written down while reading. And I read out loud and I make my thoughts out loud such that you're with me, right? So the new thoughts is really just a summary of everything that we've talked about. I've talked about while reading. And lastly, there is a Q&A session when this podcast hopefully in the future gets some comments, right? Okay. So as per usual, I'll start with the news. I'll share, as you can see, I'm now sharing my screen. And also, as per usual, we start with the COVID-19 and we see, well, what is the total number of cases? As per nearly 20 minutes ago, you can see that, as expected, we're at 13 million cases, but in addition to that, 145,000. It's not a large increase from yesterday, as we were very near to the 13 million. I think we were only around 30,000 off, maybe even less. However, it's worth noting that today is Sunday. No. Today is Monday, means that the new data are from Sunday, which means that it has been weakened, and therefore there is some underestimation. And we'll also be seeing that, or we saw that last week and the week before that. So we can only expect that it also happens this week. Now we see that the deaths are at 573,000. A large number. We're nearing the 600,000. I think that we'll reach the 1 million. I don't hope so, but I really doubt that we won't. So the 1 million is very, very realistic in my opinion. The number of serious and critical ill of the active cases is still at 1%, and the death is also at 7. Is still at 7%, as it has been throughout this podcast since I've started this podcast. A good thing, I think. It's good that it hasn't gotten worse. We also see that there has been a lot of closed cases. However, the deaths is still at 7%. If we go into the specific countries and looking at yesterday's data, we can see that the United States has nearly hit the 3.5 million mark of the total cases. Yesterday they had less than 60,000, so 58,000 new cases, pretty good. Well, considering, right? However, it is the weekend, so that might be an underestimation. As we saw, it had been at the 60,000, and it also hit 71 in one day. Now, the death rate for the US is only at 380 individuals, which is actually quite shocking that it's this low. Maybe that is some misinformation, not misinformation, but it's not that it's miscounting. I just think that they have not properly added up the total deaths, because it doesn't make sense that it drops by this large amount. The US has always been at 900 and 700 and sometimes this 1,000 mark. So it doesn't make sense that it drops down to 380 unless there is some counting errors or missing data, right? Brazil is at 25,000, which also doesn't make sense as it has consistently been at 40,000 and a little bit above past couple of weeks. However, the deaths are a little bit, I suppose, realistic. However, they are still too low. And I'm saying that because in the previous days they have been at 1,000 consistently, right? And above 1,000, 1,100. And I think 900 something very close to 1,000 was the smallest amount. So it doesn't make sense that it's at 600. So also the weekend might have played in. However, India has 29,000 new cases, which seems realistic, as they had as that is even an increase from the past days, and the death rate is also has also increased, as you can see. And another country that we usually look at is Mexico. New cases 6,000 and new deaths 539. Realistic, unrealistic? Well, usually they are 700. I also suppose that there is something there. Then you have South Africa, which is also a country that we are considering usually. 12,000 new cases. Does the weekend play an effect? I really don't know, as usually they lie between 10 and 13,000, right? One day they went down to 8,000 and I was a little bit hopeful. However, we discovered that that was because of the weekend. But however, now it is the weekend and they are at 12,000. So if they have the same bias, so the weekend bias, let's adopted that, it means that the true numbers are much higher. So that will be interesting to discover. It's worth noting that Germany seems to have no new deaths and France only has 3, which is quite. Maybe it's the weekend, but maybe it's also maybe they're also doing a pretty good job. However, Spain is at 682 new cases and only 1 deaths. So this is new spark, new increase. I think so. Because one of the news that you won't be seeing, but that I received on my phone, is that Angela Merkel is quite concerned about Europe currently because a lot of people are going to their favorite destination, beaches in Spain. Now, of course, it can be that she's saying that because German tourists are going to Spain and not spending their money. So that's the economic argument, right? They are going to Spain, spending their money there instead of spending it in Germany, and increasing the GDP of Germany and helping the small businesses there that have suffered through the brutal lockdown that happened in Germany. However, I think it's mostly the health part that we are concerned about in Spain, because people go to the beaches and they party afterwards, right? We know that. We know that people go to beaches and then they party. And in Spain, I doubt that the lockdown is as strict in these places as they are here, as they are in Germany, for instance, because they care about their economy maybe a little bit more than the health. However, they have been hit harder than Germany, and we know that. But that's also because they have been more lenient, right? Will we see a kind of second spark, a second wave in Europe? I don't think that it's unlikely. Let's put it like that. With people flying all over the place right now, I don't think that it's unlikely. Okay. So as you can see today, I actually have a couple of news, but I think also because this part of the podcast is quite interesting. However, I actually think that these are from yesterday. So no, they are not, are they? I don't know. Um, I don't know why they have suddenly been saved into the cloud, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm just pressing them right now, so I'm a little bit afraid that they will all just pop up at all at the same time. Yep, that's exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened. Yep, yep. One, two, three, four, five. How many do I have? I really don't care about the structure of it right now. One, two, six. It's not that I don't care about the structure. I don't care about when the news come, right? Okay, so let's start with this one. As you can see today, I have included Fox News as I usually don't, and that's because they have something that's quite interesting here on the front page. However, going into depth with reading the article, it certainly becomes bias. Certainly becomes bias. However, the headline and what's happening is quite important, right? From an outsider that doesn't know about the U.S. So as you can read here, local governments uh, weigh major property wealth taxes plunge to plug budget holes caused by coronavirus. So the idea is that local governments are going to raise the taxes on properties in order to close some budget holes that have been caused by coronavirus. So the holes may have come from an increased payment of unemployment insurance as people have become unemployed. It could also come from not being able to fire not public officials, but but local government employees, right? So public employees. However, they had to stay at home. So and they have been unproductive, right? Because they have stayed at home. So the idea is that they want to increase the tax on properties. Okay, is that a good or a bad thing? Well, if you want to maintain the the profit and the revenue that you're earning from your property, well, then the properties will increase in price, firstly. Secondly, why do they do that, right? Why property taxes? Why not income taxes? Well, income taxes makes no sense at this point because a lot of people are unemployed and you want to incentivize people to come back, to move back into labor. Why properties then? Well, properties because they are a little bit, as we economists call it, inelastic. What does that mean? Well, it means that you need somewhere to live. Therefore, raising the price of these is something that you are willing to pay because you're living there. It's not something that you can live without. And therefore, you will be willing to pay that increase in tax. However, the problem becomes if some states increase the taxes and some don't, and that the employment in that city that has increased the taxes goes down. So the idea is that you increase the taxes such and people stay because they still have the work that they are attached to, and that's why they keep staying. However, in the case with the US at the moment, where a lot of people are unemployed, maybe raising the taxes will yield a result that is that more people will move around the country rather than actually pay these taxes, and then the counties or the states that have not increased the taxes will be the beneficiary of of this, right? As more people would come in, maybe those people are innovative, right? We also see that this trend to working at home has increased. So maybe that will also make people more willing to move than the usual inelasticity um, to housing and and property taxes. Yeah, and I think that's the only headline here on Fox News that is worth mentioning. And here's the BBC. And most importantly here are things that relate to the COVID-19. So if we start on a general term, the World Health Organization have come out and said again that it might get worse before it gets better. So what we're experiencing right now is not the worst thing. It will get worse if we don't start to act and we don't show that we actually care. And I really feel them in that, right? And we can see that from the stock market. Instead of money going to healthcare and insurances, that's of course a kind of waste of money if you think of it, really. However, it is needed at this point in time. And instead, we're putting money into Tesla and the like. And I am a little bit, and as you can hear from today and yesterday, maybe, and the day before that, uh, I'm a little bit skeptic about Tesla because the stocks have increased tremendously in the past days, and I think it's a little bit irresponsible. However, going back to the COVID-19 and the warning from the World Health Organization, I do follow them, and I see the problems that we might be facing in the near future if we don't come together. The problem is that the US has already gone out from the World Health Organization, right? Uh, that means that we have to work around that, right? We have to work around that. So we, at least right now, don't have a common front. That's first of all, right? Countries have different strategies. As we've said previously, some countries have prioritized the health, and some countries have prioritized the economy. As we've talked about, that is of course a political decision because closing down the country is a political decision. It's not a it's not a decision made by the experts. And I think that relates then down to the next news that we have here, that the White House is here. It targets the U.S. disease chief Fauci, Anthony Fauci. We know him all because we think he's a clever guy who's been working on the various diseases for a very long time. However, now he's being questioned, and they are saying that he's not consistent with what he's saying, and what he's saying is sometimes untrue. Mm, that is that of course, there is something into that, right? Because he said something with wearing a mask, not wearing a mask. He said maybe closing down China is a little bit unresponsible. However, it's not irresponsible, but maybe an overstatement. Uh, that is true. He was wrong on those. But however, he says that he was wrong, right? That's the first thing. And secondly, he's willing to adapt his opinions to the times and to the data as he gets them. Um, and he's not playing a political game. And the White House seems to be playing a political game, right? And we talked about that previously, and that may be caused by the fact that there is an election in November. So that plays a big role into how the corona pandemic is being handled by the White House currently. And it's never good when you start attacking and going and targeting uh, some people that have devoted their entire lives to something. Um, in this case, of course, uh, an elite professor in the field of diseases, um, of pandemic diseases. In this case, Anthony Fauci. It's not a good sign that you're divided into the political uh, game and expert game. That you've divided those two, because those two should play together. Um, it's a little bit difficult to talk about this without criticizing any individual person. However, it is worth mentioning that one should really consider the tragic situation that the United States is in at the moment and not play any games. It's not for fun what's happening. There is a clear divide in the US. Now, of course, they will say that we're overplaying this pandemic. However, it's not for fun that 137,000 people have died, whether that being because they were old and then got the disease and then died, or because they had a weak immunity, or anything. We know that they have died because they had this virus in them. They would not have died had they not had this virus, supposedly, right? It, however, the U.S. is built a little bit different, right, than any other country. They are trying to be a federal system, and it's also trying to be capitalistic in the sense that not all have free healthcare. However, that is difficult, and also the masks. People are not willing to wear masks. I think it's if I know any American, it is worth to have someone on this podcast to get their perspective on things. I'll try to find someone and ask them about this because it's about an American mentality. However, we also know that there is a lot of different mentalities in the US, right? You have the people that are Democratic and those that are Republican, and those have very different opinions. Um, let's just wait with the US and see what they will reach, if they will reach an agreement. Now, on another, okay, so down here you see again, so this is the Guardian, one that I did not have the previous days. Um, However, it's interesting today. Um, as you can see at the bottom left, you again have the WHO that is making some warnings. At the top, you have that there has been a Polish election, and um, the incumbent president won again. That is a result that we did not want in Europe because he's more Trump-like than Europe-like, in the sense that he's more friends with the US than he is with the European Union, and he's more of conservative, um, and maybe less open-minded as politicians usually are here in Europe. Another interesting news, actually, here at The Guardian that I've not been able to see anywhere else is this notion of a second revolution in Syria. And if you press that and you go and read about it, it actually seems that there is a lot of people that are going on the streets. And that is, of course, because their country is ruined. Not only because of that, but because it is ruined, and their goal, which they wanted, of getting rid of Bashar al-Assad, so the incumbent president, has not has not happened. The question is, well, can their country get more ruined? And it's a pretty good question. It's a pretty good question. I really doubt it. And therefore, they would, of course, be willing to go down on the streets and demonstrate. However, of course, it can then become something like Yemen, right? Can become something like Yemen, which is much worse. Or as I don't know actually how bad it is compared to Syria, but we're not talking about a famine in Syria. We're talking about a famine in Yemen. Um so yeah. So the question is, will Bashar al-Assad come down? Well, he stepped down and let a new government come in place. However, what is that new government, right? There's really no structure in place. Um, with Syria, you also had the previous days the news about not allowing aid to come through land, which was vetoed in the United Nations Security Council by China and Russia. And those are, of course, backing Bashar al Assad, which means that he controls the food supply. And therefore, he can kind of pressure the population a little bit more and not further these revolutions, as these people that are on the street and being unproductive um, will have no income and no uh, way of meeting their basic necessities of food and shelter. Well, mostly food, right? Uh, yeah. This is Al Jazeera. And here, interestingly, you again see this update about the World Health Organization saying that it might get worse. You see that South Africa is reimposing a lockdown. Um, they had a lockdown, they opened up, and now we're above the 10,000 multiple days in a row, more than a week, I would say, and even in the weekend where you're testing less, it's still at that level. And I don't know how interesting this news is, but it's worth mentioning that there is another video where another police officer in the United States puts a knee on an individual's neck while he's down in the US. If you press, if you go to Al Jazeera, you press on this title, you go into the article, you will see it. And I think it's a little bit all over Twitter right now. That's of course not good, meaning that they don't learn, that they quickly forget, and that the police is not going to apparently change their way of conduct. Now the CNN again, and I think that's the only news we will be taking from here, from the CNN again, that the WHO is a little bit fearful about the future. Uh, it's a little bit difficult for them to predict the future, and that makes sense, as apparently governments are not reacting in the way that we wanted them to react. And I think here most considerably the United States of America, which we expected uh, to have the strongest, which actually on paper has the strongest healthcare system, right? However, the way that it is structured has now shown to be ineffective, and the way of structuring the political arena has also shown to be ineffective and to be slow and to be, yeah, just not yielding results in times of really trouble. Yes, Bloomberg, as you can see, excuse me. Um, Also, the main headline is about COVID 19. However, the stocks have been doing pretty good today. We might even be hitting some new records. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the stock market is going to look like. Uh, in, yeah, the stock market has really increased quite much. Gold prices have hit 1,800, and oil prices have gone down to $39. Um, the oil is expected, as production, as OPEC has now removed all the constraints on production. So if we're not too careful, we might reach zero again, um, which would be interesting if we did. And the gold has increased very slightly, very slightly, however insignificantly, right? For in the past many days, and that's because the stock market has increased. As we've talked about multiple times, gold and stocks are now substitute to one another as they try to save the value of money. Then it's about evaluating where is it safest, what is it that you're worth, that you're willing to have, right? Are you willing to have a stock in in Tesla? Are you willing to have a stock in Apple? Or are you willing to buy 2 grams of gold, 10 grams of gold, or what what do you think, right? And that's what's wonderful about this world. You choose, you choose, you pick, you choose. Um, you have to live with the decision at the end of the day. Okay, so that was the news section of this podcast. Now we're gonna turn to the question from last time, which reads the following: how can the value of consumable goods be evaluated, and should they be considered in the total amount of money in circulation? I think it's meant to say non-consumable. It's not consumable. It's non-consumable. How can the value of non-consumable goods be evaluated? And these are something such as the military and maybe someone coming and making your bed, right? So some services. How can they be evaluated? That's the first part of the question. Can we put a price on the military? Well, we know that that's a little bit difficult as it is a public good, and people, if asked about how much they are willing to pay for it, would underestimate, well, mm, mm, give you a lower uh, price than, because they know that it would be taken out of their taxes, right? They would give you a lower amount than what they actually think. Um, or maybe a higher, right? Depending on how they think the other people in the population have it. And therefore, it's a little bit difficult to understand, well, what is the value of these goods. Usually, the value of the good is the um, marginal cost or the marginal benefit that this individual gets. At least that's the maximum amount that the individual is willing to pay. It's the marginal benefit that the individual gets from this good, right? So for me, having this pen is equivalent to having 20 kronas. So that's the price that I'm willing to pay for it. Will not be willing to pay 30 because 30 kronas for me is more valuable than this pen. It's actually a pencil. Than this pencil. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the things that I can everything everything equal, right? Ceteris paribus. It means that the value that the 30 kronas in my subconscious, I have observed the market and I know what kind of things I can buy for the 30 kronas in the market. And those things that I can buy in the market, maybe 20 bananas, that's more valuable to me than having this pencil. And therefore, I will not be buying this pencil. However, I am evaluating it at 20. So just for a round number, let's say that that's equivalent to 10 bananas. And as we've talked about, money is just a medium, right? It's something in the middle. It's just a tool. So theoretically, if you give me this pen and 10 bananas, either I would sit like this for an infinite amount of time and consider this decision, or I would be willing to flip a coin and take either of them for the 20 kronas that I possess. Now, for other people in the population, they might value this at 30, right? Interesting. So would this cost 30 or 20? Well, it will cost 30 until all the people that have bought it for 30 have bought it, and then suddenly it's only me, and if he wants to sell it to me, he will have to put the price down to 20. So that's a physical product, right? It's a physical product. However, the individual could also just have put a 20 and then he could be indifferent for all people at the very same time. However, he would have foregone a profit that he would otherwise have been able to get, right? However, when it comes to military, what's the value of military? Because it's not something that you can see. However, it is maybe the security of a country. So what is security of a country? Well, it means different things to different people. For some people, they might say, well, for me, it's valuable that I have a queen that runs the country, or that it's this particular government that runs the country and not this particular um, government that runs the country. Or if we take the case of Second World War and Denmark, it's, for me, more worth it that, okay, I think that's a bad example. However, in this context, uh, for me, it's more valuable that it is a Danish government and a Danish king that is the highest power in the country, rather than it is the German soldiers, right, and the German Reich. Okay, and therefore I would be willing to pay some money that can go, at least in the form of taxes, right? Because the assumption is that these non-consumable goods are in taxes, or at least military, because it's a public good. But what about the person that comes and makes your bed? Well, that's a private good, isn't it? It's a service. Is services goods? Yes, they are. Or are services goods? Yes, they are. So with services, it seems like, well, that's the same thing as a private good, right? Um, that's why there is a lot of bargain when you make these things, because it's a little bit different from individual to individual how much they are willing to pay. However, therefore, I think systematically, well, if you had to make a system, one price is of course the easiest thing. However, it's always good to have the highest price and then write maybe that you're willing to bargain, right? And then and of course the individual will try to bargain at first. However, those that are just bargaining for the sake of bargaining as to gain or pay a little bit less, well, they would bargain weaker than those that actually are only willing to pay less. Otherwise, they will um, not have this product. Yeah, and I think that's what happens in black markets, right? I think this is when people are kind of scouted, right? I'm here thinking about prostitution. I don't know why, but it just seems like a good example in this case. Uh, the prostitute can always look at the individual and see what kind of individual is it? Is it one that is willing to pay, or is it one that is not willing to pay that much, right? What's the willingness to pay? However, when it comes to these public services, right? We said I'm willing with the military. We said that I value this these people to run the country rather than these people. Fine, maybe it's more drastic than what happened to Denmark, right? And the country is burned to the ground, as Poland, for instance. Maybe you would then value the military if you are a real estate agent, because what are you going to sell? So in that case, you would be willing to pay some money to the military in order to have some commodity that you can live off. And you'd actually not only be willing to pay this year, but because building the building, constructing the building would take multiple years, and therefore you're actually willing to discount some of the future years, or the profit and or let's say the wages for simplicity that you would gain in future periods, and pay that, if we're considering a lump sum price, to the military, to these unproductive laborers, in order for them to protect you, such that you have something. And the same thing counts for the farmer, right? So how can the value of non-consumable goods be evaluated? It depends, of course, on this non-consumable good if we're talking about something like the military, it's about considering the discounted value of the profits that would occur had these non-consumable goods or services not been non-existent, right? So think about the thing that we saw in Syria. Those people should theoretically be willing to pay some money to the military, or to some people that are the military, in order to have peace. And how much are they willing to pay? Well, it's not only the security this year or next year, but maybe the security for hundreds or thousands of years, right? Because you don't know how prosperous those countries could be had they not been in war. And that's also what we read in Adam Smith yesterday, funnily enough. And should they be considered? And then the next part of the question goes, should these non consumable goods be considered in the total amount of money in circulation? And that related to the statement that we read previously in The Wealth of Nation, that the sole use of money is to circulate consumable goods, right? But if these are non-consumable goods, should they then be considered in the total amount of money that is in circulation? And to that, you got to think about, well, what is money and how does it come into circulation? Well, I'm pretty sure there's a formula for this. However, the idea is that you kind of got to know how many times kind of the money circulates hands, and I'm looking at the Wealth of Nation just to think about it. Yeah, I did not have monetary policy at the university. I concentrated myself on the labor market. However, you gotta know how much that money is being circulated, firstly, and you gotta know the prices of the commodities. Makes sense, right? And the value of these commodities. Yeah, well, that is the same as the price in this case. Okay, so you have 10 bananas and you need enough money to be able to circulate these, right? And you have 10 individuals and 10 traders, so you need enough money for these people to be able to trade to get these bananas. um, However, should the service of a different individual that goes into that is producing something that is unproductive be considered in the circulation of bananas? Should we consider circulation of money? So should we consider the 10 bananas plus the servant that comes and makes your bed every single morning? Well, if it's something that you can't live without, right? Such as a nurse, because someone that comes makes your bed, that's maybe a nurse, right, in the hospital, or an elderly home. I think that should be considered uh, in the circulation of money, as it is necessary. It's a necessary product, isn't it? It's something that's necessary for. However, it's also wages, not really a commodity, right? However, if those old people, well, those old people are not going to be productive. I actually think that it shouldn't be now. Now that I'm saying these things. Boom, 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 boom. Well, they are really not adding anything to the GDP of the country, and therefore it doesn't make sense to increase the money. The only thing that will happen is that the value of money will decrease. Well, if nothing happens to the money and you start to consider those people in the economy, then you would have to spend less money on the banana because a lot of people would need to have the money, right? And we assume that there's enough bananas for all. Um, yeah, to give you a professional answer, I need, of course, to have learned these things at the university. I did not, sadly. Should they be considered in the circulation of money? Should they? Does it make sense if, like, does it matter? Does it really matter? Like, I would say no, and I would also say that it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because things will just cost less. Because, well, well, now that I'm thinking about it even further, um, the circulation of money, if you print more money, because now we're only printing. However, this question was of course inspired by Adam Smith, where money actually was bound by the gold, by the price of gold. However, now, as we know, we have, as we've talked about, and I think I've developed this idea, is that the money is controlled by the forex market, kind of, where the forex market is then considering this currency versus this currency, which is this basket of commodity in one country versus the basket of commodities in a different country. So it's because non-consumable goods. Let's say the military. Should we consider the military? Well, let's say that you have two countries that are producing exactly the same. They have exactly the same amount of people. Now in one country you have a military and in the other you don't. Now of course the taxes in one country would be higher than the other one because the wages that go to these, because the military is publicly owned and they get their wages from taxes. Great. Would you have more money in country one or would you have more money in country two? In circulation, money in circulation, well, the idea is that both countries are equally productive. That means that that the country where this hypothetical case, the country, and I'm sorry I'm looking down, but that's because I'm thinking. So in the country where that does not have a military, those people that otherwise would have worked at the military are now unemployed. Great. Does that mean anything? Well, because the other people are in the military in the other country, they are, and there is a good quote. Yes, it is better, says the proverb, to play for nothing than to work for nothing. So that means that people, that in the country where you have a military, those people are working, and they would not be working if they were not receiving something on top, right? So, well, you can simplify it even further, right? You can say that that the country consists of two individuals. Both countries consist of two individuals. In one country, one. But then the question, yeah, okay. Let me just follow up on that. So, so you have a farmer, the productive laborer, and one that is military, and in the other country you have one that is the farmer and one that is unproductive, that is just playing, right? Now there is an amount of money in this economy. However, for this individual, the military individual, to be willing to work, he needs a higher wage. And since the productivity of both countries are the same, and let's say that we also start with the same amount of money, it would mean that taxes would be higher on this individual, such that this person could earn a little bit more, right? So the military individual could earn a little bit more. So the farmer would be worse off in this country. Okay. Does this have any impact on the circulation? Well, I suppose because the military individual has more money and he can put more money, well, he can consume more, firstly, and he will maybe also have enough for saving. And by Adam Smith, now I build upon this example, right? He can invest that money into the productive laborer, and the productive laborer can get richer and rich, or more productive, right? In the other case, the farmer already has the money. However, the idea is that the other individual consumes a little bit more, and you should think of this as many individuals, right? And when not only as two individuals, but as maybe 1,000 and 1,000. And those that are in the military will consume more, and therefore, in order for them to be able to consume, they need money to be able to consume. And therefore, you need more money in circulation, because this farmer could just save the produce of his labor, right? Could just save it, and therefore less money is in circulation because he's saving it. Now, there is many constraints to this example. I'm not considered that this farmer may not be able to actually improve his own facility by saving. However, he needs another individual, maybe an engineer, to be able to make him the machinery that has be to also be produced in a factory in order for that to be productive. However, this is a very simplified economy, and I think it makes sense that if you have a, a large or a portion of the population that is working on non-consumable goods, so they are doing unproductive work such as the military, right? So it's not bad. It's not bad unproductive work. It's not that they are unemployed. They're actually doing unproductive work. Healthcare, for instance, right? They're doing, and judges, unproductive work. Great. Because they will receive a wage and they will demand something in the market, you will actually need to increase the amount of money in circulation. I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. And if not, please, future viewers, tell me why it's not. Please. Okay. So I think that's it from follow up from last time. We're already an hour into the podcast. Quite shocking. I think actually that's it with this notebook. Let's go to the next one. I actually bought another notebook because I knew that this one was nearly done. The outside feels a little bit different, even though it's exactly the same, as you can see. They are both bought from the Flying Tiger of Copenhagen. They are exactly the same. Maybe it's because one is older than the other. I've also had that one for a very, very long time. Yes. So what's the plan now? The plan is to read a little bit and take notes. However, before that, I think, and I'm sure that you have deserved a small break from me, and you will get such a break right now while I, as per usual, go to the bathroom at the 1 hour mark. See you in a little bit. And I will be back and read from Adam Smith. So I'm back again, and welcome to Karim Talks About Economics podcast number 16. Very proud, actually, that I've reached this far with it, and being this consistent. I should actually start to advertise about this now. I think it's time. I think it is time that people get to know about this. Yes. So we are at page 184 in the Wealth of Nations. And as alluded to yesterday, we talked about the idea of what would happen if we had no war. And last time it ended with this. More houses would have been built, more lands would have been improved, and those which had been improved before would have been better cultivated, more manufacturers would have been established, and those who had been established before would have been more extended, and to what height the real wealth and revenue of the country might by this time have been raised, it is not perhaps very easy even to imagine. Right? So we've lost a lot of things because a lot of money have been put into use in wars, right? But though the profusion of government must undoubtedly be retarded, what? It really says retarded. Retarded the uh, retarded the natural progress of England towards wealth and improvement, it has not been able to stop it. The annual produce of its land and labour is undoubtedly much greater at present than it was either at the Restoration or the Revolution. The capital, therefore, annually employed in cultivating this land and maintaining the labour must likewise be much greater. In the midst of all the exaction, with all the exaction of the government, this capital has been silently and gradually accumulated by the private frugality and good conduct of individuals, by their universal, continual, and uninterrupted effort to better their own condition. It is this effort, protected by law and allowed by liberty to exert itself in the manner that is almost advantageous, which has maintained the progress of England towards opulence and improvement in almost all former times, and which it is to be hoped will do so in all future times. So he's quite hopeful for the future. England, however, as it has never been blessed with a very parsimonious government, so parsimonious has at no time been the characteristic virtue of its inhabitants. It is the highest impertinence and presumption, therefore, in kings and ministers to pretend to watch over the economy of private people and to restrain their expense, either by sumptuary laws or by prohibiting the importation of foreign luxuries. They are themselves always and without any exemption the greatest spendthrifts in the society. Let them look well after their own expense, and they may satisfy trust uh, and hmm, and they may safely trust private people with theirs. If their own extravagance does not ruin the state, that of the subject never will. Um, so he's very skeptic towards leaders, right? Which tells you that this book was published in this period of time. It tells you that they had the freedom to actually talk and criticize the government. However, it's also questionable how many actually read this book due to its advanced nature. Well, at least now it's advanced, but previously it wasn't really, I think, advanced, because he also says that this is made for commoners, right? And people that might not be businessmen. So I'm gonna write something. So um, in 1776, government wanted people to spend less, which is quite interesting, right? Because the thing that you hear today is, oh, capitalism is about consumption and demanding. It's not about saving. You're trying to make people spend as much money as possible, and the government is spending as much money as possible, and that's what he's fearful of here, right? However, we should save in order to be able to advance. uh, what kind of effects does this have? Well, we're talking about the exact same thing, because this system that is presented here in this book is the exact one that we're following today. However, today we're telling people, hey, spend so businesses can thrive, while he's saying, don't spend, invest so businesses can thrive. What he's aiming for is the advancement, right? Technological, well, at his time, manufactural advancements. We're talking about technological advancements in our period in time. However, we're telling people to spend. We're even saying that he's even saying that the government might have gone so far, such as to prohibit luxury products, as to limit the spending of people, right? So it gets me a little bit. It doesn't get me anything, but it makes me think. Makes me think. Why are we actually spending so much today, right? Uh, or are we really spending a lot? And then the Keynesian approach, right, that the government should spend more. I think that Adam would be much against that. Very much against that, actually. Very much against that. Okay, let's continue. And then he ends out with, if governments could limit themselves, then private individuals would be willing to limit themselves, but because they see that the government is not limiting itself, they would naturally also not limit themselves. As frugality increases and prodigality diminishes, the public capital, so the conduct of those who expense just equal their revenue without either accumulating or encroaching, neither increases nor diminishes it. Some models of expense, however, seems to contribute more to the growth of public opulence than others. The revenue of an individual may be spent either in things which are consumed immediately and in which one day's expense can neither alleviate nor support that of another, or it may be spent in things that are durable, which can therefore be accumulated and in which every day's expense may, as he chooses, either alleviate or support the effect of the following day. So we're talking about durable goods here, right? A man of fortune, for example, may either spend his revenue in a profuse and sumptuous, I don't know what that means, sumptuous table, and in maintaining a great number of uh, uh, menial servants and a multitude of dogs and horses, or content himself with a frugal table and few attendants, he may lay out the greater part of the mm, adorning his house or his country villa in useful or ornamental buildings, in useful or ornamental furniture, in collecting books, statues, pictures, or in things more frivolous, jewels, baubles, ingenuous trinkets, of different kinds, or what is most trifling of all, in amassing a greater wardrobe of fine clothes, like the favorite and minister of a great prince who died a few years ago. Were two men of equal fortune to spend the revenue, the one chiefly in the one way, the other in the other, the magnificent the magnificence of the person whose expense had been chiefly in durable commodities would be continually increasing, every day's expense contributing something to support and heighten the effect of that of the following day. That of the other, on the contrary, would be no greater at the end of the period than at the beginning. The former too would at the end of the period be the richer man of the two. He would have a stock of goods of some kind or other, which, though it might not be worth all that it cost, would always be worth something. No trace or vestige of the expense of the later would remain, and the effects of 10 or 20 years' profusion would be a completely annihilated. Annihilated. I don't know what this means. Annihilated. Annihil, annihilated, as if they had never existed. So completely destroyed, annihilated, and annihilated. No, 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 no. Yeah, I've never read this word before, I suppose, but it is annihilated. This happened to me yesterday also. I'm a little bit embarrassed about that. However, I'm glad that I've seen this word now. So I suppose it is worth writing durable goods, save their value, save, or at least part of their value. And here he's giving the idea of buying paintings and things like that versus uh, uh, whole creating parties and having a lot of servants, right? The servants, they go once they have created what you want at this specific time, they go away. However, this painting, you will be left with this painting or this jewelry or these clothes, you'll be left with those, and you can kind of consume them every day because you can look at a painting every single day. You can also wear your clothes every single day, and you could at the end of the day also sell them. So, and therefore, if you spend your money on those, if you had to consume something, right, using those, spending your money on those things would be better for you, as you would have something at the end. As the one mode of expense is more favorable than the other to the opulence of an individual, so is it likewise to that of a nation. The houses, the furniture, the clothing of the rich, in a little time become useful to the inferior and middling ranks of people. They are able to purchase them when their superiors grow weary of them, and the general mm, accommodation of the whole people is thus gradually improved. When this mode of expense becomes universal among men of fortune, okay, that was badly read, however, there is a full stop here. In countries which have long been rich, you will frequently find the inferior ranks of people in possession of both mm, in possession both of houses and fortune, perfectly good an entire, but of which neither the one would have been built nor the other have been made for their use. What was formerly a seat of the family of Seymour is now an inn upon the Bath Road, the marriage bed of James I of Great Britain, which his queen bought with, brought with her from Denmark as a present fit for a sovereign to make to a sovereign, was a few years ago the ornament of an alehouse at Dunfermline. 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 Um, in some ancient cities, which either have been long stationary or have gone somewhat to decay, you will sometimes scarce find a single house which could have been built for its present inhabitants. If you go into those houses too, you will frequently find many excellent, though antiquate, um, antiquated pieces of furniture which are still very fit for use, and which could as little have been made for them. Noble palaces, magnificent villas, great collection of books, statues, pictures, and other curiosities are frequently both an ornament and an honor, not only to the neighborhood, but to the whole country to which they belong. Hmm, interesting, interesting, interesting. And this is interesting because I suppose this is why we have a queen, right? Basically, this is why Denmark has a queen. So they are an ornament to the entire country. So we're talking about things, so these durable goods, right? They still have a value today, which is supposedly a good thing because they increase the wealth of the nation, right? And these things will naturally, as they aggregate in value, right? They would go to lesser and lesser people, and then suddenly that would be the lowest point. And if that's the lowest point, and you previously had these people, well, suddenly those people would be willing to buy this because those people have increased to bigger things and better things. So the entire population will just shift, right? Hopefully. That's the idea. Now, of course, if you demolish the house and build another one, well, then you kind of have a problem, right? Because it never goes on to the then poorer individuals who would always then be poorer. However, let's belong. Let's continue. I don't know what I said there. Okay, so Versailles is an ornament and an honor to France, Stowe and Wellington to England. Italy still continues to command some sort of veneration by the number of monuments of this kind which it possesses, though the wealth which produces them has decayed. Which produced them has decayed. So that's the Roman Empire, right? And though the genius which planned them seems to be extinctible, extinct, perhaps from not having the same employment. The expense, too, which is laid out in durable commodities, is favorable not only to accumulation but to frugality. Okay? If a person should at any time exceed in it, he can easily reform without exposing himself to the censure of the public. To reduce very much the number of his servants, to reform his table from great profusion to the great frugality, to lay down his cupage after he has once set it up, are changes which cannot escape the observation of the neighbors, and which are supposed to imply some acknowledgment of preceding bad conduct. Few, therefore, of those who have once been so unfortunate as to launch out too far into this sort of expense have afterwards the courage to reform it, till, till ruin and bankruptcy oblige them. But if a person has at any time been at too great an expense in building and fortune, in furniture, in books or pictures, no imprudence can be inferred from his changing his conduct. I suppose from him changing his conduct, but this is old English. These are things in which further expense is frequently rendered unnecessary by former expense, and when a person stops short, he appears to do so not because he has exceeded his fortune, but because he has satisfied his fancy. So the idea is that maybe there's some social pressure. If you live in a huge mansion um, with, okay, so we have a problem. Yes, we're back. Yes. So if, okay, good, we're back. God. Okay, I'm just gonna talk now. If you have a lot of servants, that's luxury. Um, that is very visible to all people around you, and you will not get rid of that if you're having a bad year, for instance, right? However, they will drag you down, right, in costs, and it might end up with a bankruptcy at the end, right? Because you cannot maintain this. But however, in front of your neighbors, you need to maintain it because of your uh, social status and where you live and things like that. However, if you buy a painting, you have it hanging, it has its value, and maybe you have a bad year, then you sell it. Then, firstly, you earn a small profit, and secondly, no one would tell you why did you sell that painting, because if there is any social pressure, you can just say, well, I don't like it anymore. I don't know what's happening with the stream. It's as if someone is stealing my internet, but I don't know. No one knows the code for the internet. So let's continue. Are we hitting the 2 hour mark yet? No, 1.5 hour. That's fine. I also like reading, so it's not a problem. Even though I also hope it's good for you guys that are listening. So the expense beside that is laid out in durable commodities gives maintenance commonly to a greater number of people than that which is employed in the most profuse hospitality. Of 2 or 3 hundred weight, weight of provisions, which may sometimes be served up to a great festival, one half perhaps is thrown to the dunghill, and there is always a great deal wasted and abused. But if the expense of this entertainment had been employed in setting to work masons, carpenters, upholsters, machines, etc., a quantity of provisions of equal value would have been distributed among a still greater number of people who would have bought them in pennyworths and pound weights and not have lost or thrown away a single ounce of them. In the one way, besides this expense maintains productive, in the other unproductive hands. In the one way, therefore, it increases; in the other, it does not increase the exchangeable value of annual produce of the land and labor of the country. I would not, however, by all this be understood to mean that the one species of expense always betokens a more liberal or generous spirit than the other. When a man of fortune spends his revenue chiefly in hospitality, he shares the greater part of it with his friends and companions. But when he employs it in purchasing such durable commodities, he often spends the whole upon his own person, and gives nothing to anybody without an equivalent. The later species of expense, therefore, especially when directed towards uh, frivolous objects, the little ornament of dress and furniture, jewels, trinkets, gewgaws, frequently indicates not only a trifling but a base of selfish disposition. All that I mean is that the one sort of expense, as it always occasions some accumulation of valuable commodities, as it is more favorable to the private frugality and consequently to the increase of public capital, and as it maintains productive rather than unproductive hands, conducts more than the other to the growth of public opulence. Um, I would love to read more. However, we've now reached a new chapter, chapter 6, and that is with the headline of stock lent at interest. Of stock lent at interest. We are at page 186 now. And the last part here was about being selfish. I just have to check something on my phone. Synonym for unselfishness. Altruistic, yes. Selfish and altruistic. Altruism. Okay, so I think I also want to write a note that Adam criticized the government's policy openly, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of expression, I suppose. Because it's not speech, it's expression. So, what we read today was that in 1776, at least, the government wanted people to spend less, and they had measures of limiting spending by, for instance, limiting or prohibiting foreign luxury products, right? Which is a little bit different than what we're doing today, as we're trying hmm, um, to increase, um, or at least that's what people perceive it as, right? People perceive capitalism as a way of people just increasing their demand and buying things that they don't want, and that's really what everything is about. But if we base capitalism on Adam Smith, which is the father of economics, then it is not about that. It's actually about saving as much as possible and then reinvesting that. It's not about buying the newest TV out there. However, he does then go on and talks about that, right? Um, However, it's about saving as much as possible in order to be able to put that into productive hands. So, all this idea of having so many services, for him, I think, doesn't make any sense. Services that are good, that are productive, is good. However, it's a little bit difficult to actually know what is productive services, right? Because yeah, okay. So you wanted to give the money to productive hands, right? You want to save as much and then invest that into productive hands. What does that mean? Well, you want to give it to farmers. You want to give as much as possible to farmers. That's what's happening today, right? Farmers are killing themselves in France because they can't pay in their loans. What does that tell you? We've strayed away from Adam Smith. And then the idea that you need to buy the newest TV, the newest phone, and things like that. Well, usually the phone is a product. However, yeah, I don't know. It is a product, right? It goes into productive hands. However, then the question becomes, well, why do you actually need the phone? Well, a firm needs the phone. A productive firm needs the phone because then you can communicate a little bit better and you can make better trade. Nice. And that's also why you need the internet and things like that. However, if it is for gaming, then it's just a waste of time, isn't it? If it is to go on Instagram and all of these things, then it's unproductive. Marketing is basically also unproductive work. Yes, it increases the profit and makes you, yeah, know what's actually going out there. It's also unproductive. And he even gives an example of that, right? Uh, if you make these large parades, which are basically advertisement today at least for private companies, right? So I can give you an example, even though it's a little bit productive, right? The half marathon in Denmark, here in Aarhus at least, it's called Bestsellers Half Marathon. That's a private company that sells clothes. Fine that it sells clothes, that's productive, and that it's reinventing that into marketing. However, it could have spent that money into better factories, right? That's even more productive. So that's looking at it very black and white from Adam Smith's point of view. Uh, he then, and I think, yeah, I think we've discussed that now enough. Then he goes into discussing, well, if you are going to spend it on products that are on commodities or services that are unproductive, well, you can spend it on durable and non-durable goods. So durable goods are the goods that maintains their value. That's why you see that uh, some rich people buy paintings and they buy jewelry because that saves the value. They buy houses and mansions and things like that because it kind of saves the value. If not, and clothes, right? He also says that clothes are durable goods, which makes sense. he says that these things maintain their value. At least if they don't maintain their value, then they don't decrease too much in their value. Is that good or bad? Well, that's pretty good, because suddenly money that would otherwise have gone to waste, you still have that and you can trade it in the market and then get something else. And he says it's a way of saving your money. Well, of course, you lose a part of your money, however, it diminishes at a lower rate. That's a good thing. He also says that that's a way maybe of increasing the value of the entire country, because had we otherwise spent it all on parades, right? Every individual made a parade for himself. I'm looking this way in order to see, well, what's the streaming at. So right now it's at 700, now it's at 3,000, now it's at 1,900, now it's at 3,000 again, right? So it changes a lot, and that will of course affect how you view me. But regardless, let's go back. So if every individual made a parade for himself, then there would not be something for the generation that came. So he says that he gives an example of a bed, right? A, an, a bed that was bought by the king to a king, or a noble to a noble, that was produced in Denmark. And now, instead of that having this status, it has now gone down a little bit in value, such that it's somewhere else at this particular time. And he says that yes, of course, makes sense, because it was not meant to be used right now, which is 1776. However, it's still usable, right? Have you made a parade instead of buying this bed, this royal bed? You would not have had this money, you would not have had this commodity, and you would have to respend the money into producing a new bed. Not good, right? Now the money that would otherwise have been gone to the bed, because we assume that the country is still productive, right? It has not gone down in productivity. The country is still productive at the same level. Well, that money can go into something else. Amazing, right? And he argues that that's maybe why we still are happy with having villas and noble houses and castles and things like that. And I related that into having a queen, uh, into having the kingdom. It's called the Kingdom of Denmark, right? So maybe that's the value of it, kind of. But it's not a commodity, is it? Isn't it? It's not a durable good. Well, we are kind of using it as an advertisement that is well, in that form it is a commodity, right? It's a living good that can move from one place to another. It might now have diminished in their value as they are less politicized, and we can still use them year after year after year after year, right? He then goes on and criticizes himself, right? He's open-minded about the idea that maybe buying these durable goods mean that you're only buying it and he goes on to criticize. It went to zero, so I'm just going to repeat myself. So he goes on to criticizing himself and saying that, oh my god. He goes on to criticize himself and says that maybe buying these durable goods is a little bit selfish, because you're buying something that you can use every single period, right? You're buying a painting. However, buying these things that are non-durable, for instance, a parade, would make you and your friends happy. And therefore, you're being altruistic if you buy these things. However, the money is going to waste. Therefore, it's a little bit of a trade-off. Do you want to be kind of selfish, buy some jewelry, save the value of your money, and increase in in conclusion therefore the capital in the country, or do you want to be altruistic and spend the money on your friends and have a good time? However, decrease the capital of the nation in total. Right? Which is quite an interesting thought. It's good. What I like about Adam Smith is that he goes back and forth. What I also like about Adam Smith is that he criticizes himself a lot, and he's open about it. And for some people, yeah, it might seem complicated, and that's what I've heard from a lot of people, that reading this book is very complicated, and that's why they give up. However, taking it maybe a little bit slower, as I'm doing with this podcast, gives me the opportunity to dig deep into what he's saying and to understand it, because I also have to explain it as I go along. Uh, and I hope you also get something out of it. So the podcast is spontaneous, informative, and open-minded. This is the informative thing, and I'm very again, and I'm very happy that Adam Smith is open-minded himself, right? Because that helps me also be open-minded. And the one thing that I find pretty strange about the passage that we read today was that Adam Smith basically criticizes the government and the policy, and he says they know nothing. That's what he has done the entire book nearly, right? He's criticizing the government, that it's unproductive, and that's exactly what we're saying. Um, okay, not what we're saying, but sometimes what we're criticizing government for still today. It says, well, it basically means that the government is always going to be criticized. However, more insightful is that he has the freedom to express himself, right? In this manner. It's quite fascinating for me. And I hope it is so also for you. Now it's about finding a question for next time and then ending the podcast. And the question for next time is going to relate, I think, as it must, something with this selfishness and altruistic and durable goods, right? And something that relates the past to today. So that, what can I come up with? Uh, or maybe the idea that we're now asked to demand more. God, why is it fluctuating so much? Well, regardless, yeah, it's going to relate to this idea that they wanted to limit spending in order to save, and now we have to spend more in order for them to earn more money, the private sector. Okay. How should governments reinvest money in into the public by using no, I'm sorry for this sound. I'm really sorry. Um, um, through durable goods? Question mark. So how should governments reinvest money into the public through durable goods? That's a very interesting question. It's very open as well because I'm here hopeful, right? That the government can do something that's good because the government wants to spend money because otherwise, because that's what they want. Those are some politicians that want the money because they are politicians, right? That's that's the reality of things. That's the reality of things. Thanks for today. I'm gonna cut it short. Um, that's the question. How should governments reinvest money into the public through durable goods? Thanks for staying with me today at podcast number 16 for Karim Talks About Economics. And as per usual, I love you all and take care of yourself. However, as per usual, I don't end like this. There's always a motivational catch at the end. What is this motivational catch today? You might think. And it is never. I've struggled with this one. I think it's similar to one that I've had before, but never to judge people without knowing the facts. Always assume an individual is innocent until proven guilty, and I think that's how we should keep it. Not the individual is guilty until proven innocent. Does not make sense. We should have we should start out with having with first of all being open-minded, and secondly being believing that individuals are good in the base of their heart. If not that specific individual is good, then the vast majority of people are good, right? And therefore, it's with assuming that one individual is good. I think it's with listening to people in order to understand their side of the story without making prejudgments. It's with knowing people instead of judging them and then thinking that you know these people without you actually having interacted with them just because of something they said once or a picture that you saw of them online, or maybe you heard something from someone. So don't judge people by one thing, but judge them by the entirety of their personality. And getting to know this entirety of the personality, when doing so, you have to be open. You cannot be closed. You cannot direct that individual into somewhere where you want him or her, because you know this box, that's the first impression that I got was this, and therefore they have to fit this kind of persona that I've created for them. And if something is wrong, then that's just an outlier, right? However, you should think of it, because we do this subconsciously. We might put people into boxes as we meet them, uh, just to make it easier for ourselves. However, maybe if there's a lot of outliers, then maybe consider then the box that you created at the beginning is wrong, and either try to expand the box or remove the box entirely and or just put them into a different box. I don't know. But the idea is that you have to be as open as possible and know that you can be mistaken when judging people. Uh, it's not always easy. It's difficult not to prejudge people based on ethnicity, sex, interests, where you met the individual, what you've heard about this individual, how this individual is dressed. It's difficult. However, the content of that individual's personality is the most important thing, in my opinion. And that's the motivation. So get out there, get to know people, and be open to understanding them instead of prejudging them and knowing them without actually knowing them, right? So that's it for the motivation. I love you and take care of yourself. Okay? I'm gonna put the finger up as per usual to know when this ends. I don't know. I am a Maisie.